Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
Yeah, okay, so crazy life story. Let me just tell you a little bit about what's going on. Hi, everybody, I'm Andreas Xirtus. Welcome back to the show. This last week's been crazy. It's been crazy. I mean, you guys know already. I had a video that talked about Archimedes and a space pig narrative from my 3rd grade class that was privated and blocked. I've heard a few people tell me stories that something weird happened to them like that. But all of them were people that are doing videos with like Leo Zagami or somebody who had upset somebody in a lodge somewhere. It seems like the only excuse. Then I went to my tech support. And they were great, and they fixed it, right? And that was wonderful. And I was like, good job. You know, Google Tech Support are good. And there are a lot of people in this evil world or corrupt world that are okay. You know, let's just, come on, guys. We're not here to just dick around. We're trying to do the best we can. Yesterday, day before yesterday, I got a new strike, permanent strike, for endangering child safety, for violating the child safety policy. And I was like, what? And there's no appeal, and there was no video. You go to click on the video, there's nothing there. So I'm like, what's going on? This is another ridiculous situation. It seems pretty clear that whatever's going on in the other social media networks, this is consolidating of power, right? I mean, they're losing CNN Plus. Netflix has already destroyed its own name, so there's very little they can do. They control, they being the money, like Venrock, Blackwater, all these different groups that have money in these groups, Vanguard, that they want to continue to control. Thank you very much, welcome Gentry. That's really rad. I appreciate that a lot. So that's another thing I should have said earlier. By the way, these videos are going to be unsubscribed. They're going to be unmonetized, undermonetized, even though they've got no cursing, they're educational. It's a lot. So anytime you guys are able to help, keeps this thing going. And that's actually pretty funny because it's like, ha, 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 we're keeping this thing going. You can't stop it just because you're mean. Okay. Anyway, I was getting a little sidetracked anyway, talking about some of the money in these things. But like YouTube they're consolidating power in YouTube, clearly, because they've already lost everything else. And they're like, well, we can't sell them stuff anymore. They're almost not stupid enough for that anymore somehow. So we better just force it down their throats for free. And that's YouTube is the consolidation of power. But there's still a lot of good people there. I know that sounds crazy, but it's kind of like any teachers union. You know, there are people from my hometown that wanted people to be able to share videos and that they still exist. Now they're not, it's like you should probably leave the country kind of thing. Like at a certain point, if it's that corrupt, you should go to Odyssey. You should be working at Odyssey. And this is something very important to me. I would never say go to YouTube for my videos anymore. You go to my Odyssey. If you can go to my Odyssey, go to my Odyssey. And when this all happened, we were okay because you could go to my Odyssey. So really quickly, just to remind everybody, because I think that matters. Let me see if I can get this to pull up. 1 second. There we go, right? Yeah, so if you go to Odyssey right here and you type in /Xirtus, or even if you look for Xirtus, you're going to find my channel. You'll find videos by other people about me. You can find live streams, everything else. So go to the Odyssey. But not just that. I mean, this all comes down to something that happened because of Odyssey. Now, I'm going to show you the movie I downloaded. The Gods Must Be Crazy. I'll talk all about it. They're not going to stop me from talking about The Gods Must Be Crazy. They must be crazy. So this is a great movie. And by the by, it's on Odyssey. Like everything, any movie you want now is on Odyssey. Just like Loki, you can get the movie, you know. So just go look it up there. But if you're looking for a public domain movie, especially, like it's going to be available. And so I thought, okay, great. There's also copies of this movie on YouTube. I go to YouTube, I can type in The Gods Must Be Crazy, and you'll find tons of copies of this movie, full length, short clip, high definition, the third movie, the second movie. I'm not kidding. Everybody's got The Gods Must Be Freaking Crazy. Okay, this is just crazy that they think that it's not okay. Now, what I found was that in some countries, there's like in South Africa, I believe, and in a few, maybe it was in Cameroon as well. There's a few countries where the movie still had some copyright laws, because British copyright laws are different and fair use doesn't work the same everywhere. In the United States, a fair use claim, I can just say, I use this clip because I grew up in this world and I have the right to exist. America. It sounds kind of strong tensed, but it's true. Because if you were to say, I can't make art based on things I've seen in my life, I mean, I could think of some words, but essentially it's pretty bad. So it's unconstitutional. Your pursuit to happiness has been detrimented. So you're set back to saying my rights, my fair use rights, and these are ambiguous terms that have to be looked at by case. But because of common law in America, it's very clear that we have the rights to that. And I have yet to lose a case with like Disney, right? Disney says, Andreas, you win every time. That's a nice thing. It's a nice thing to feel and hear. All right. I go through though and I say South Africa is actually kind of important to me. I understand British copyright laws, and I know that in South Africa, I have enough viewers that I would consider losing some. If I couldn't get them to see the video, it's almost like, what's the point? And I would just send you guys again to Odyssey, where you can see the uncensored full video. YouTube is the Pravda. It's the Soviet, blockade. There's a reason why we do things here. I have to use YouTube, right? I feel the value of using YouTube is it'll be helpful. So I'm using YouTube to try to break the barriers to people who are like, because you say the right things to the right people, they're like, I know, but other kinds of people need to hear things from the beginning. And I keep remembering, like, wow, I don't realize how little people have talked about this subject. So I have to do YouTube. Anyway, to the actual story. I posted this video. I got a copyright thing from South Africa, partially blocked, I think is what it said. And I was like, okay, who cares? Because I can use other things. I can use Odyssey. Deleted the video. This is a long while ago. There was never it was like 5 minutes online to check the copyright, but it was unlisted. It was private, and I never showed anyone. I never even logged on to look at the video myself. Okay. But it is, again, a movie on YouTube that is okay to watch. Now, a little later, a few days later, forget exactly, I think it was 4 a.m. some morning. I think it was Sunday morning, 4 a.m. But it just feels like it took forever. They said, channel's down, channel strike, permanent strike, no content for a week, no telling anybody what happened. I mean, rather you can't post a post. I couldn't post a, hey, remember how everything worked out yesterday and I told you I liked tech support for fixing the last problem Google had? Today, another problem exists, right? So that happened. And the alphabet agencies, I'd like to say also. I did say, I should have said it again this time. The views and expressions used in this show do not necessarily respond to those or represent those of alphabet, the alphabet agencies, any of these letter agencies or any of this stuff. So I've tried my best to kind of tell you guys, like, hey, it's pretty obvious that they're not super stoked with me, and I need your help because otherwise they're not going to be very happy with me. I've tried to make that clear, but I think they're still worried that people think I'm speaking for the Babylon system or something. I don't know. I'm not sure. So I get a new complaint email that says, you cannot do anything about the fact that you uploaded The Gods Must Be Crazy and deleted it, and we're giving you a strike. And I'm like, wait a second. How do I appeal that? And they're like, well, you can't because the video's been deleted. And I'm like, but how do you give a strike for a deleted video? You never saw the video either then. Like, what are you telling me? Like, if this didn't exist, habeas corpus. I'm like, well, my hands are tied. I'm like, see, that's a bummer, right? And again, I'm not really always this way, but in terms of when you have to be, I was like, well, that's a bummer. Because again, when you talk to tech support, I always say, how are you? Hope you had a wonderful day. I'm so really sorry that I have to bother you with these questions, but I'm very confused. I hope you can help me, etc. But when it gets to the point when someone's telling you their hands are tied, you have two options. The right option is to close your laptop, go outside, skip a few stones, come back inside, get back on tech support, talk to somebody else, go around another wall. It can only work so many times. Tech support is not as big of a group as you think it is. And so I went with option 2 because I've already been talking to tech support for like 3 or 4 days. They got to know about me by now. I finally went with the whole, well, gee, but you're telling me that Andreas Xirtus has been declared to have violated, child safety policy of YouTube. right? I mean, you're saying that this policy exists to keep children in safety, right? So what you're saying is essentially Google feels that they're publicly saying this, and I'm going to have to explain this to people, and you guys want to have, this is the benefit, the opportunity for Google for proper optics, where you can show that you did the right thing, that you took responsibility as a company and corporation. Corporate responsibility is really important to me and to the world. If Google took their own responsibility, it would look good. Of course, if Google didn't, and I'm not exactly I guess I'm a little famous now. It's kind of a weird thing to think about. But I know people, I will tell them, Google knows because of optics that I'm not just silenceable anymore. And that's really interesting about bullies and about people. Because, the fact that changed in my life, I can show you. Yeah, it's real. There is a selective enforcement program. They very openly will tell you. They selectively have great programs that you can get in. Every account is different. Every promoter thing is different. So, yeah, it's very selective. Now, this isn't a democracy. This is their private property. And I'm not going to even pretend it's not. That's one of the reasons I work on free software, so that we can have commons, because it doesn't exist. And people who think that, this is their private property, really, they're confused. So I do try to curtail my content to fit within the YouTube norm, and I make sure, when I tell you these things, that you understand that's within the letter of YouTube's policy. I follow YouTube's policy to the letter. But yeah, when it came to the point where their hands were tied, and they were even saying in the letters, we understand that you're trying to follow our policy to the best of your ability, and we really do appreciate that. Unfortunately, there's this error, but we can't fix it. My hands are tied. So you're telling me that YouTube made an error, though. YouTube made this error. YouTube is telling me that they can't fix something that they broke. And because of that, YouTube is essentially going to stand by a clerical machine error that is accusing me of endangering children, which is not just slander. Because when you write down slander, when you print up slander, it becomes libel. So Google is saying essentially they're going to libel against Andreas Xirtus. And then that would be untenable. And the attorneys of Andreas Xirtus would be forced to pursue resolution, right? Which immediately that ends everything. That ends all your by the way, if you talk about lawyers, they shut down their conversation. But they say, oh, well, thank you very much, and blah, 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 and we'll figure it out in that case. And then they break open their fingers that have been tied together, apparently, because their hands are tied. Literally seeing their hands are tied. And they, by business hours, my account is fixed, my account is unlocked, my channel is reset again, reset again. The reset just keeps happening. And this time, who knows? Who knows how long I'll be here for? I doubt it's forever because, there's this part of the letter. They're very nice. God bless tech support. Maybe they just really believe this because of the world we're supposedly living in. But they ended the letter with a "stay safe," which I felt, is indicative of my lifestyle. I deserve that. For anyone who tells me that as I'm about to get chased by a boulder in Peru or Los Angeles or New York City, just so you know, stay safe is probably a decent thing to say, but it did come off, it felt a little red flaggy. Having said that, good job, Google. You did the right thing. America is watching now. The world is watching now. So we're all proud of you right now. Stay something we can be proud of. That's very important. If you don't do that, So in the meantime, for everybody, I appreciate that you came and you watched that little bit. Let's move on to a little bit of news, okay? All right. Love you guys. What a wonderful world. Let's go to this thing. Monkeypocalypse. It's pretty cute. What did I just see? I just saw something important that was in the news. Is there anything? Well, okay. One thing that you guys are going to want to do is you're going to want to go later to watch, where is this? Oh yeah. Is this all connected to this long thread going back to Benevolent Dreams' post? I'm going to just go with Benevolent Dreams. Okay, we'll go to Adam Krigler because Adam Krigler, Based AF Mondays is later today. As soon as you're thinking to yourself, Andreas, he's going to be gone for a week, he's back for 2 shows in a day. So Adam Krigler's bassist AF Mondays. Benevolent Dreams did some really amazing art here for all the people in the show. I got to be Doctor Strange, which I like very much. And then here's, this is Flawed and as the Hulk. And then here's Eighth, I like to say, but he's really quarter. Black Garrett. So we're going to have a whole show later. It's going to be action-packed adventure where we all talk about things, not just things I like to talk about, but things that we all like to talk about. And that's very good and humanizing. And I think that'll be a lot of fun. So let me see also. I'm trying to find real news, and I'll tell you what. I don't know if I believe in news. I don't think news exists anymore. I think it's all just a bunch of nonsense. Alexander, I keep coming back here. Something that I like is the Axis of the Ordinary. It's talking about reinforcement. Learning agents can cooperate, compete, communicate in multi-agent settings. Massive drone swarm over straight, decisive, and Taiwan conflicts. We're starting to see modeling of the Taiwan swarms because people were saying, oh man, drones, consumer drones. There's no way we're going to see those in military. They just don't get how China works yet. It's amazing. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of drones in this conflict, obviously, right? China, with the most people, they're probably going to use this. This is the right system for them to use. It's the only way. Hold on a second. Did I destroy my sound? Is sound now quieter? I can't even tell. Somebody let me know if I ruined my sound level. Okay. So looking at the argument that U.S. Air Force has conducted itself and in conjunction with independent organizations continue to show an immense value offered by swarms of relatively low-cost network drones with high degree of autonomy. In particular, simulations have shown that these them to be decisive factors in scenarios regarding defense of island of Taiwan against a Chinese invasion. Oh, really quickly, Andreas.me/store. If you guys are trying to get some merchandise, do it. I need the merchandise because I need to survive. The fact that we don't have proper YouTube support, that would be great. Anyway, Andreas.me/store, Xirtus.com/store, whatever. Last week, David Ochmanek, a senior and international air affairs and defense researcher at the RAND Corporation and former deputy assistant secretary of defense for forest development during President Barack Obama's administration, discussed the importance of unmanned platforms in Taiwan Strait crisis-related wargaming that the think tank has done in recent years. Ochmanek offered his insight during an online chat, which you can watch in the full below. And so here's an interesting video that's some military games people, some war games people from RAND. And what they're talking about essentially is the value of using mass-produced swarm drones that are part of a greater intelligence, right? And we had kind of talked a little bit about this idea when we were talking about Archimedes and space pigs, because we talked about swarm intelligence and how swarm intelligence is being employed in AI and how it is used by pests that we would associate with the plague. So that's kind of an interesting thing. I want to connect it, but I'm going to wait a little bit because we're going to talk about that later today. So that's just sort of, that is what it is right now. So we can go beyond that. Earth goes around the sun. What's your best evidence? Based. Really? This is going to be a lot of effort. Okay, so this is great because actually Matt Strassler is a pretty decent human being. He just believes in heliocentric Earth and all that, but he believes in real decent amount of stuff. Having said that, he puts together this thing. Hey, if you really wanted to try to prove that the Earth was, this globe going around the sun, here's all the things you'd have to do. And he can't even do these things, right? So, confirm that the Earth's spinning, almost sphere. Estimate the size of the Earth and Moon and the distance between them. Show the sun's larger than the Earth and much further than the Moon. And that the stars are still further off. Verify the other planets' orbit, the sun, and estimate their relative distances from the sun and their orbital times. Infer a relation between these distances and times, known as Kepler's law, and show a similar Kepler type law working for objects orbiting Earth, and infer these laws that the same gravity that makes ordinary objects fall creates an inward acceleration, one that follows an inverse square law, holding a certain objects in orbit around the Earth and others in orbit around the Sun. Okay, and so trying to do that, it's a lot more work than you might think. People keep trying to do this, and you'd be surprised. It actually is still not done. A female seed battle has to contend with her partner's nightmarish. Ooh, that sounds terrible. It must be about plants, though. National Geographic. Yeah. Oh, beetles with horrible phalluses. All right, that's something for some of you out there. Sometimes scientists really love the sexy side of science, so I'll let you have that. A series of uncoordinated mass stabbings, hammer attacks, and cleaver attacks in the People's Republic of China began in 2010. The spate of attacks left at least 90 dead. Okay. Cats learn the names of their friends' cats in their daily lives. Cats learn names. People love names. Scientific report. Humans communicate with each other through language, which enables us to talk about things beyond space and time. Do non-human animals learn to associate human speech with specific objects in daily life? Well, we know this because they've freaking taught animals how to respond to human. That's what we do. Fetch, heal. So clearly they do. All right. Team of researchers located microorganisms in a piece of Australian rock that they think might be alive from 830 million years ago. This might be something. A team of researchers have located 830 million-year-old microorganisms in a piece of Australian rock salt they claim may even be alive. According to the researchers, the finding may also have implications for the search for alien life in future samples returned to Earth from Mars, as detailed in a paper published in peer-reviewed journal Geology. By the way, if anybody has specific things that they want to cover, because I'm just going to run through them, super chats will happen. And know that there's a few more videos coming out this week because I thought that I was canceled, so I was going to do some other videos. So I have some videos that are going to be coming out on Ptahhotep. And if there's any other subjects you want me to look into this week, throw them at me. Even after such a significant amount of time, these microorganisms are still detectable. Sarah Schrader Gomez, first author of the paper and former master candidate in geology at Western Virginia University, said in an email to Motherboard, we might find biosignatures in similar materials. So start looking in. We'll start to find life that's been separated for periods of time. 830 million years is a lot to grasp. I don't know. Okay, I'm going to skip most of the news, and maybe there'll be more news tomorrow. I mean, I know that, Duran had some things on Maripol, but I think we're past that. The Passover magic season. Secret Egyptian themes hidden in Exodus. The Jewish holiday week Passover is once again upon us. Millions around the world will experience the traditional Seder meal and remember an event from thousands of years ago. They will eat and drink symbolic foods in a yearly ritual to commemorate their ancestors' escape from Egypt and to remember the man who led them to their freedom, Moses. He founded the Passover event on that fateful night long ago when the Israelites finally fled Egypt. Imbued through the Passover tale is an undeniable sense of magic. Moses and his brother Aaron engage in contests of magic with the priests of Pharaoh, turning the Nile into blood, blotting out the sun, bringing out terrible plagues like lice to force Pharaoh to let the Israelites escape. They use their staves as they would use magic wands, and Moses even conjures the power of the Lord with his staff in order to part the waters of the sea. Charlton Heston is Moses, right? The word Passover comes from the Hebrew word Pesach, which many scholars believe means protection. It refers to the passing over or protecting the Israelite homes against the angel of the Lord during the last plague. I thought it was the angel of death, but okay. That of the death of the firstborn of Egypt. During the plague, Moses commanded his people to spread some blood of their lambs on the door frames of their homes to mark them apart so as to be protected from God's angel. In Exodus 12. On that same night, I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn of both people and animals, and I will bring judgment on all gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you. The Angel of Death and the first Passover, illustrations 1897. Recent scholarly consensus seems to be shifting back towards the view that Passover and Exodus were in fact real historical events that happened sometime in the late Bronze Age. This is the view of a scholar like Kenneth Kitchen, Manfred Betock, James Hoffmeyer, and Richard Elliott Friedman, who comes closer in his most recent book, The Exodus, 2017, to assuming its historical reality rather than more than most biblical scholars have in decades. I don't know. By assuming the Passover and Exodus really happened, we can begin to better understand the world of magic in which Moses lived. Passover is a holiday of magical potential, full of ancient stories of awe and wonder. This was known even 2,000 years ago when we read the words of the martyr Stephen in Acts 7:36. Concerning Moses, he led them out of Egypt and performed wonders and signs in Egypt at the Red Sea and for 40 years in wilderness. I believe the idea of these wonderful signs derives from the ancient practice of Egyptian magic. Let us examine some of these magical motifs and see if they find their way into Passover story. Passover magic and heka. Activating the ka. Magic or heka was a pervasive aspect of everyone's life in ancient Egypt, performed since the country's earliest days by nearly everyone in society. It was regarded as primeval cosmic field created by the gods and given to humankind, who could in turn manipulate it for their benefit. Heka meant activating the ka, or the spiritual force of all life. I like that. Crown. Keenan, thank you very much for the super chat. Andrew Ryan Seller. Subject, DMTs, subatomic orbitals, and tachyons. Ooh, thank you. Yes, that's a great idea. Go Canada. Just wanted to check that really quickly. Okay, couple things on Egyptian magic. So there's just kind of a thing that we need to cover here. This idea of the ka. I think if you are familiar with the show, what is that movie? The Golden Compass? Golden Compass. Definitely not how you spell it. Thank God they didn't come up with something else. The internet. It's out of control. Golden Compass, 2007, based on a book. Everybody wears Masonic aprons. You guys have probably seen this. Let me see that. Masonic aprons. Did they notice it? No? I don't even think they noticed it. Okay, well, in that movie, everybody's wearing Masonic aprons. All the adults are. How do you do, like, the bad guys? If I type villain, anybody? Nothing? Adults? Whatever. I'm not going to do it. So in this movie, though, there's a compass, right? And I don't know if you guys know what even the symbol of masonry is, a compass, right? So that's, that's what it is. But they made it a cute little compass. It's magnetic and Chinese, mortartarian, which is great. And everybody's got a ka. They have an Egyptian soul that associates them with an animal that their soul is in several parts, right? They've got the two-parter. And part of that soul is like, it could be a polar bear or an owl or whatever. I forget the whole deal, but everyone's soul is an animal. And yeah, so I don't know, maybe that's enough, but wanted to point that out about Egyptian magic, is that you have this sort of primal beast that's associated with you, and you remember we were talking about the Varaha, this idea that Vishnu had avatars. So if humans do too, fantastic. By the way, the audio is okay? Just wanted to make sure. I think it is. Okay. Used for nearly everything. To ward off all forms of evil, to find love, encourage fertility, communicate with the gods, perform medicine, test for pregnancy, curse enemies, secure an eternal afterlife, and even for the good luck in business. Most importantly, practitioners of heka would interpret dreams, and we get a direct glimpse of this practice through the tales of Joseph in Genesis, who became a dream interpreter, magician for Pharaoh. Heka was performed most potently by Pharaoh and the lector priests, the high class of priests who could read and write and perform magic, words of magic, hekau, using scrolls, wands, staffs, and other devices such as wax figures and copper serpents. Look at this guy. He looks well fed. Good to be a priest. Passover, the earliest of the Jewish remembrances, is also the oldest, it's also the one rifest with magical qualities. Its very name, Pesach, means protection, referring to the protection offered by the blood of the lamb painted over the door frames. When Moses commanded the strange ritual, he was ordaining in essence a magical ritual. It was perfect. It was a perfect example of Egyptian apotropaic magic or protection magic, one of the main functions of heka in Egypt. These rituals were conducted during precarious times like childbirth, death, and in the case of Passover, protecting against the plague of the death of the firstborn. By the way, just to remind you guys, the flooding of the Nile is this thing that happens. And just so you know, Passover time, season, let's say Passover season happens in where we go, Nisan, which will be April, March, right? Something like that. Okay, so then you go to flooding of the Nile seasons 2022. I'm just gonna say it's gonna be, because we're following the same thing, and we have to wonder, when did these things happen? April is the point. I wanted to show you a better example of that, but you get this 3-season thing we talked about in the last video. Basically, that the flooding of the Nile happens, except for they've had certain amounts of care in stopping flooding in certain parts of Luxor now, because they've built these dams and the Aswan Dam and everything. But when the flooding of the Nile would lead to swamps, and the more swamps there's stagnant water where there can be mosquitoes and malaria. And malaria kills people, right? Malaria. How many people have died from malaria? Affects humans. More people have died from malaria than anything. I don't know how else you want to put that, but more people have died from malaria than death itself. So basically, this is an important concept, that there was a flood. There was a seasonal flood. This was probably one of the worst ones they've ever had. Also, remember, White Nile. Excuse me. The White Nile runs into into Cairo, into Luxor from Ethiopia and from Sudan. Here's the Blue Nile in Ethiopia. Here's the White Nile in South Sudan into Uganda. But it really comes from the center above Juba, and it flows both directions because there's just so much water. And it goes into Khartoum and then beyond Aswan, except for where the dam has been put. So the problem with the Nile being flooded back into Egypt is there's nowhere else for the water to go. It ended up with a bunch of people dying of diseases that were caused by bugs and by whatever else was in the swamp and swamplands surrounding Egypt. So we read of a spell to protect a book. As for any man who shall remove this book, carry it off from me. Their corpse shall not be buried. They shall not receive cool water. Their incense shall not be inhaled. No son or daughter shall wait upon them to pour water offerings to them. Their names shall not be remembered anywhere on earth. They shall not see the rays of the solar disk. So you see these death curses. Egyptologist James H. Hoffmeyer noted that the Hebrew word used in the Bible for magicians was Hartumen, for which an Egyptian origin has long been recognized. Scholars generally agree that the word derives from the Egyptian priestly title Haratub, or chief lector priest, the boss of all the lector priests. Oh, by the way, we're gonna get into this, but we're gonna connect all this to Mormonism, which is gonna make you hysterical. And Jehovah's Witnesses, why not? They love the pyramids. 1914. They were the most powerful priests who worked in the House of Life, per Ankh, studying and transcribing rituals and ritual texts. As described by Professor Scott B. Nogle in his article, The Egyptian Magician, it bears stressing that there is nothing inherent in the title or actions of the biblical Hartumen, that suggests that they were merely charlatans engaging in sleight of hand. Quite the contrary, the Bible portrays them as elite professionals who possess considerable abilities. These Egyptian priests, even if they pale in comparison to those of Yahweh, they're still the best out there. In the famous Westcar papyrus in the Berlin Museum, 1780 to 1570 BC, we read several stories about these chief lector priests or magicians who worked for Pharaoh. However, none were as strong as the king himself. as Bob Breyer explains in the Ancient Egyptian Magic. One magician who could never be accused of trickery was the pharaoh. By virtue of his position, he was the most powerful of all magicians. It was he who caused the waters of the Nile to rise and fall, and who brought fertility to the land. Descending from the gods, the pharaoh had the greatest of all magical powers. So you couldn't just be a nepotistic pharaoh. You had to be... The house of the pharaoh was a group of educated people that were the most educated probably in the region. That's the idea. And through celestial bureaucracy, they were administrators because they could prove that they were able to predict the flooding through algebra. Thus, it was Pharaoh whom Moses and Aaron had to directly confront if they were to convince him to let their people go. Hold on a second. Aaron had to directly confront it if they were to convince him to let his people go. They would need the power. Magic as potent as Pharaoh's. Was the staff of Moses really an Egyptian scepter? And we've been saying this. I think we kind of already proved it, but let's read a cute little article about it. Was the staff of Moses really an Egyptian scepter? The staff of Moses is perhaps the greatest magical object of the Passover narrative. It remains one of history's most interesting artifacts alongside the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, and Excalibur. The Bible speaks of it being used by Moses to perform magical feats and to demonstrate the power of God. It is first mentioned in Exodus 4:2-3. Then the Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand? A staff?" He replied. The Lord said, "Throw it on the ground." Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and he ran from it. It is assumed that because Moses was a shepherd at this point in his life, he was carrying a simple wooden crook. Who assumed that? Not me. However, the first time his staff is mentioned, magic pervades the scene, for it immediately turns into a serpent. This led some to wonder if the innocent staff was not really a lector priest's magical wand, or even the Egyptians' scepter of royalty, which is like, duh. Of course it was. Heka, scepter of Pharaoh. Ooh, let's focus on that for a second. Heka, scepter of Pharaoh. This one belonged to Tutankhamun. Wouldn't you know? It was meant to symbolize a shepherd's crook, so the king could metaphorically shepherd his people. Come on, too much. It was a symbol of authority and rulership, according to Caroline Seawright. Nearly identical word heka was used to describe magic, and the scepter was also a magical implement with a long history. In an ancient pre-dynastic tomb at Abydos, an ivory heka scepter was found, likely that of the king. Ivory. Elephants. Ganesh. Again. Hoffmeyer notes that throughout pharaonic history, the shepherd's crook has been a regular symbol of authority, of kingly authority, deriving from the concept that the king was the shepherd of his people. We read in the Wisdom of Merikar, a text from the 2200 BC, that well-nourished is mankind, God's flock. Because the word for the ruler and scepter was the same, i.e. heka, Hoffmeyer wonders if perhaps the staff of Moses presented a direct challenge to the authority of Pharaoh. We know that from Exodus that Moses was a priest in Egypt and raised in Pharaoh's court before he left Egypt. So it is highly likely that he would have been trained in the ways of the lector priest and possessed his own heka scepter. This is where the magic comes from. For Hoffmeyer notes the wordplay because the nearly identical word for ruler and scepter, heka, and magic, heka, which use slightly different K sounds, the latter being a more guttural, ka versus ka. I don't know if you could tell. Ka. Yeah. If Moses was indeed a high-ranking priest of Egypt, he would have had a magical scepter, through which he could perform magic. If he was once a pharaoh, he would have had the most powerful heka scepter with the most powerful heka magic. This makes more sense considering in Exodus 4:20, Moses' staff is called Metal Ha-Elohim, a Hebrew phrase meaning the staff of God. This gives it divine power and bestows upon Moses special authority as God's messenger, exactly as Pharaoh's staff did for him. Here's the ivory scepter from Abydos' tomb of Scorpion King, a ruler of Upper Egypt that lived centuries before Egypt was unified. Even in these early times, the heka scepter was a powerful tool of the king and remained so until the Roman times. Snakes or crocodiles? We read, so Moses and Aaron went into Pharaoh and did what the Lord had commanded them to do. Aaron thrust his staff in front of the Pharaoh and his officials, and it became a serpent. So, what about Aaron? Aaron's staff doesn't necessarily need to be... I got to look more into Aaron. I thought Aaron was raised by the Israelites. Is he raised by the Egyptians? Does he have an Egyptian staff? I don't think so. I got to look in that. It became a serpent. The Pharaoh also called for the wise men and sorcerers, and they along with the Egyptian magicians, did the same thing with their secret arts. Curiously, the Hebrew word for serpent, nahash, is not used here, but rather the word tanin, which translates as crocodile. Oh ho ho, with the feet, and they're calling it a serpent, and it's a crocodile. When Moses' staff first turns into a serpent, what is the crocodile god? Egyptian crocodile god. Sobek. That's more like it. Okay. So the staff of Sobek with the little staff of Sobek. Okay. Protective deity. Protect against dangers presented in the Nile. Okay. So that's the first thing. Mimic the symbols of their gods with the staff more effectively than they can do on their own. Eventually, the pharaoh's chief lector priests duplicate the magic act by turning their own staffs into crocodiles, only to watch in horror as Aaron and Moses' crocodiles consume its Egyptian counterparts, proving the authority of the Israelites and their Lord. A Nile crocodile basking in the sun. Tra-la-la-la-la. The idea of consuming something to gain its power dates back to the pyramid text. I think a lot of people have been doing that forever. A millennium before the Passover in the pyramid of King Unas, we read, Unas eats their magic and swallows their spirits. In Egyptian magical parlance, to swallow something is to know something, and to know someone is to have power over that person. That is the most subtle reference to cannibalism that we've yet come across, by the way. Because, Unas is known for cannibalizing. He's a king who liked to eat people. Also, the idea of turning an inanimate object into a living crocodile is similarly old. Crocodiles were a common element of ancient Egyptian myth, best personified by Sobek, the crocodile-headed god of crocodiles and Nile waters. There he is. He was also called the Lord of the Waters and even featured in the Book of the Dead. If the deceased wanted to turn into Sobek, they would have to recite, I am the crocodile who is terrifying. I am the crocodile god. I bring destruction. They were also important for the lector priests who admired their raw primeval powers. In the story of one lector priest, Ubauner from the West Car Papyrus reads of the wife of Ubauner who is seeing another man behind his back. Ubauner decides to do something about it, so he fashions a wax crocodile 7 fingers long and casts it into the pool near the other man. It immediately grows to 7 cubits in length, 3.5 meters, and consumes the other man. Fortunately, Ubauner acquiesces to the king's demands to reverse the magic, and after 7 days, he performs another incantation that opens the crocodile's mouth and frees the man. Listen to the Egyptians describe what happens next. Ubauner bent down, and he caught it, and it became a crocodile of wax in his hand. Compare that to the verse from Exodus 4:4 describing what happened to Moses' staff. It turns into a serpent, so Moses reaches out and took hold of the snake, and it turned back into a staff in his hands. Right? In his hands. We can find numerous images from Egyptian history of lector priests, pharaohs, and deities all holding serpents, serpent-shaped staffs, mirroring the image of Moses and Aaron as their Israelite equivalents. For example, from the tomb chapel of the Vizier Rekhmire, we see painted images of serpent wands, and recovered from a lector priest tomb from 19th century BC was a bronze cobra wand, now in the British Museum, of course, because they're pirates, identical to the bronze serpent erected in the desert of Moses. Copper magician's wand in the shape of a cobra from a Middle Kingdom tomb of a lector priest, along with the wands found of amulet speeds. Very interesting. Can you imagine this big squirrely staff? It's crazy. From the temple of Seti at Abydos, we see Thoth, god of magic, holding 2 staffs wrapped in a serpent's. Even the personification of magic itself, the god Heka, can be painted on coffins, usually wielding multiple serpents to indicate his power. In spell 885 of the coffin text, we read, "The serpent is in my hand and cannot bite me." Depictions of copper serpents, wands, staffs from the tomb chapel of the Vizier Reckmeyer, 1450 BC Thebes, Osiris net. To save that site for another time. I know they had an Osiris net. Showing many gods, including heka, personification of magic, holding four serpents guarding Osiris in his throne. Okay. And there's Thoth over there. The beak. Perhaps most intriguing are the images on two seals discovered by Flinders Petrie from the first decade of the 20th century. These depict a lector priest holding a crocodile in each hand. In the classic Egyptian magician power pose, demonstrating his magical authority over them by grabbing and holding them up together. Centuries later, numerous protective stelae, such as the Metternich stela, were produced showing Horus as a young boy, holding serpents and scorpions by the tail in each hand, and standing atop two crocodiles, proving his power over these dangerous creatures. And here that is there, crocodile, scorpions. By handling and controlling magic staffs, serpents, and crocodiles, Moses and Aaron were very much acting as the Egyptian lector priests and powerful rivals of Pharaoh and his own magicians. And I remember it being presented as this, that these Egyptians were looking for the best priests they had because they wanted to own the best priests because they were a money kingdom, and they were saying, well, you weren't as good as us. We're best. Even though we don't got money. Reckmeyer, Osiris net. I don't have to. Osiris net. Look at this site more. Okay, so now I want to do Abraham. Let me go here. No, wait. Joseph Smith Papyri. I did it again. Okay. So, and you know what? Real quick, couple pictures, because there's a little bit left, and it's kind of funny. This would be a funny story for you guys. Rosicrucian, Joseph Smith, Freemasonry, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, all these things, surprisingly less connected than you think, but very similar in certain ways. I think a lot of it has to do with Egyptology. The obsession with Egypt, which is like 90% made up stuff, right? I mean, a lot of the Egyptian stuff is just tomb robbers making new things. But there is some stuff. At the beginning there, they find some of the earlier tombs. And they're like, oh, well, by 1900, there's nothing left because everything's been robbed. But there's this story of a piece of papyrus, actually several, and some mummies. They get picked up, and Joseph Smith buys them, and he starts to translate them. And he decides, oh, these are the books of Abraham and Joseph, right? So that's pretty interesting. We'll start with that, and then we'll talk a little bit about why people doubted it. Oops, I'll need that window open if I'm going to do anything. All right. Okay, so here's the deal with the Joseph Smith Papyri. Really quickly, if you wanted to see it, you can't. It has been burnt in the Great Chicago Fire. Great Chicago Fire, which destroyed the museum which purchased this after Joseph Smith was killed. And so you'll have to look into this whole story. The Joseph Smith Papyri are Egyptian funerary papyrus fragments from ancient Thebes dated between 300 and 100 BC, which along with 4 mummies were once owned by Joseph Smith, the founder of the Latter-day Saint movement. Smith had said that the papyri contained the records from the ancient patriarchs Abraham and Joseph, which would probably be, according to science, 1,000, 2,000 years earlier than that. 1,500 years earlier than that. In 1842, Smith published what he said would be the first part of the translation of the Book of Abraham. A translation of the Book of Joseph was never published by Smith. The Book of Joseph, secret book. After Smith's death, the papyri passed through several hands. They were presumed to have reached the museum in Chicago and subsequently destroyed in the Great Chicago Fire. Not all the fragments were burned, however, and some eventually were acquired by the Metropolitan Museum of Art in 1947. The museum knew the importance of the papyri to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and in 1966 reached out to the church leaders to notify them of their collection. The LDS Church acquired the fragments in 1967. The rediscovery of the papyri sparked renewed interest and scholarship due to the importance of the papyri to the Latter-day Saint movement, and they have been heavily studied and debated. So here you start to see some of the things, and the first thing you'll notice immediately is what we know about Rosicrucians. If you ever had gone to like a field trip, they'll tell you about mummification. Organs are put into these little vases on the floor there. They're supposed to be, and they're pulling organs out of this guy who looks like a priest, by the way. If you remember how priests looked, it's wearing the skull cap of Moses, of Merlin, well, you get the point. Now, this picture does not stand out to anyone as particularly Jesus-y. But when you think about, Christian, I guess, but when you think about Mormonism is so much more confusing than that. It's not a monotheistic religion by anyone's imagination. It's henotheistic. It's aware that there are many gods. It talks about Elohim being the important God to Abraham and to this world and to whatever. But that you also have these other gods that exist, and you have characters that will be worshiping the wrong gods, and Lucifer, the morning star, is associated with these other more chaotic concepts. So it's funny because I think it's easy to dismiss these things and say, oh, well, this has nothing to do with Joseph or Abraham. But then also remember that Abraham lived in Egypt, and Joseph lived in the Egyptian royal courts and was a priest. So something to consider. And then go back to this page, and we'll go a little bit deeper into this story. 4 mummies, 2 rolls, and various other fragments of papyri purchased by Joseph Smith and his associates. I think it was $2,600, by the way. Eyewitness accounts conflict on the gender of the mummies, indicating it was difficult to tell. I've read that there were, 2 males and 2 females. In connection with 2 of the bodies were something rolled up with the same kind of linen, saturated with the same bitumen, which, when examined, proved to be the 2 rolls of papyrus previously mentioned. One 26 feet long, double-sided. I may add that 2 or 3 other small pieces of papyri came with astronomical calculations, epitaphs, etc., which were found with the other mummies. Okay, so small bits of scroll that might have actually been more important because they might have been tools. Okay? According to Cowdery, these 2 scrolls contain the writings of Abraham and Joseph. Phelps, Joseph Smith's scribe in 1835, wrote in a letter to his wife, "The last of June, 4 Egyptian mummies were brought here. There were 2 papyrus scrolls, besides them, other ancient Egyptian writings with them. As no one could translate these writings, they were presented to President Smith. He soon knew what they were and said, 'They, the rolls of papyrus, contain the sacred record kept of Joseph in Pharaoh's court in Egypt, and the teachings of Abraham, Father Abraham.' Because the collection was later sold and divided in parts, and parts of it were lost in the Great Chicago Fire, its exact contents are unknown. However, based on what is still in existence, it can be concluded that there were at least 5 separate funerary documents as shown in the following table." So this is the part where people say, well, it was Egyptian, right? So you got some Book of the Dead stuff. Of course, some Book of the Dead, very common, not that common, but maybe the most common of ancient Egyptian writings is stuff that's supposed to be the Book of the Dead. But then you look at it more closely, and you found that there's a lot of specifics here. You've got your serpent god, I forget his name, but all these stories that really do connect to some biblical stories. And you look at some of the stories that Joseph Smith has in the Book of Abraham, and you're like, oh yeah, Abraham was going to be sacrificed by a priest. This isn't really as far off as people realize. Now, we can read some of the ancient Egyptian now, and so when you go through it, you see a lot of the ancient Egyptian really is about the Book of the Dead rituals. But then again, okay, so you have the Book of the Dead ritual for Joseph, Uya, who's this Pharaoh's father and son-in-law. So of course, he's going to have Egyptian magic. And we've already talked about Ashara and the wife of God, that there were different gods that were being employed associated with the Canaanite gods that Abraham had brought over. So it was sometimes not monotheistic. It was often henotheistic. So these papers kind of work. Oh, I went too far again, didn't I? Yeah, I did. Okay, let's go back. Joseph Smith Papyri, contents, mummies, paperwork. the Egyptian document, and you can see them. Like, here's some other examples of rather similar paperwork. And this will blow this blew my mind, because so much of this fits in exactly with what we're talking about. Breathing permit of Hor, the Horus breathing permit, and the Theban priest. So it talks about a guy who is turned down being pharaoh to be a priest, essentially, or maybe that he was forced to and couldn't be a pharaoh, so he became a priest just to psychologically calm himself down. Who knows? And then you've got did I go too far again? I must have. But you have some of the other scrolls, Tesheret Min, Anubis from the original scroll, the Book of the Dead for Nefer Ib Anu, so all of a sudden dealing with the wife of Amenhotep, who we thought was Nefertiti, but it could be someone else. We did this last time, right? The younger lady mummy. So just to really quickly cover this again to make sure you guys know. This is something I keep forgetting to cover, I think. KV35, Valley of the Kings, archaeologist Victor Loret. Now, a lot of this stuff, it's like, who knows what's real? Well, here's some DNA evidence is not bad. And so the DNA, it is what it is. You can say it's all lies, but ironic that the Mormon narrative is identical to what the DNA studies show. I know Ancestor.com, but I don't think they had anything to do with this. Identified as Ty by the DNA records. If you remember, Ty is the Obama mother-looking lady from Egypt, and her spouse is Amenhotep III, and Amenhotep III's son is Akhenaten. So Akhenaten is the son of Ty, which again, Ty's father is Thuya is the mother, and she's married to Yuya. So Yuya is the character we associate with Joseph. Joseph clearly had been treated with Egyptian honors, and his wife was Thuya, and his daughter was Ty, and Ty's child was Amenhotep, and Amenhotep's child was Akhenaten. So very quickly you see this 4-generational thing from Joseph to Moses, okay? And we can get into Moses in the Quran, because you could talk about Musa, Mula, the cities that were named after, like Ramoses, Ramesses. Ramesses is Ramoses. I don't know. We'll get into all this at another time. Like, we've done this kind of before, but I just want to make sure people are caught up in this concept. The other thing important to understand is that, like, let's say you're talking about the Talmudic scripture. A lot of the Talmudic scripture was written in Arabic first because Hebrew wasn't around. There wasn't a Hebrew to write in. And so in Spain, you've got Maimonides, and they're writing in Hebrew. But they're writing with Arabic script. And when you start to find out the differences, you have to remember that one of them was more of a dead language. Things come back to Proto-Semitic languages. Proto-Semitic languages that existed at some point, that is the old, the way we're all speaking a combination of English and American. There was Proto-Semitic languages that have a lot of similarities to each other. You can see the Akkadian language, and you can see, Aramaic. I can't even spell Aramaic. Aramaic. Do it right. Aramaic. Okay. Aramaic is a Semitic language that originated amongst the Aramaeans in ancient region of Syria, but really it's like all over the place, and it spread everywhere, and they had different alphabets at different points, but it's the people that speak today Coptic Egyptian language, Coptic Egyptian language. Coptic's a very useful language for us for understanding Egyptian from the best of our understanding, but you have to remember that so much of modern Coptic has been influenced by Arabic, and ancient Coptic has been influenced by Greek. Now, Greek is still based on Sanskrit, and arguably there's more truth in Greek than there is in Latin. I don't know if that's the way to put it, but a lot of Latin is just backwards Etruscan, and Greek is a made-up invention, but it is still using language that they were breaking apart the words from. It's kind of the way Americanisms came out. But Coptic language has a lot of Greek, and you can see it. That's Egyptian with Greek letters, but it's also got Greek words. But then again, Spanish has a lot of Arabic words. So you got to deal with the point of this isn't purity. It's about, like, can you find any evidence of the language that was being spoken in ancient Egypt? And this is how they were able to supposedly translate parts of the Rosetta Stone. Who knows what's real, but the idea of the Rosetta Stone was that they were able to look at the sounds of the names when it said, like say Rosetta Stone. Certain symbols on the Rosetta Stone were repeated 3 times, and particularly important were names. This is a crap picture. Is there no like high resolution? Is that what I got to deal with here? It's terrible. Boom. You see these circles here? That circle around there, that circle around there, that circle. These are the keys, right? The circles. Because there's other circles found down here, down there, and down there. I don't know if you're able to even see my mouse. Can you not even see my mouse? That's annoying. All right, well, I'll have to figure that out. Point is that there are circles around these names, and they thought, hey, maybe we can associate the thing. And when they knew with one of them, because one of them was written in this Coptic, Aramaic, Coptic, Phoenician kind of script, that's a Greco script, and they were like, oh, and we do know also, that means we can start breaking apart the other one, which is, we know about Arabic as well, and we know about the different Semitic languages at the time that are phoneme based. How we're going to do the Egyptian imperial script. Maybe this has to do with certain phonemes. Maybe some of the hieroglyphs have phonemes involved, and that's the beginning of when someone started to try to break them apart. French archaeologist, hieroglyphs. What was his name again? I forget the guy's name. The dude. Yep. Champ. Champollion. And look at how he's got an itch right there, apparently. He just doesn't, he's like, I don't know. I had to stand here for this picture all day, but I got to keep my hand in my pocket. I don't know. What's your secret? Maybe it's Maybelline. Anyway, Jean-Francois Champollion, he raced to try to understand the Rosetta Stone first. The British got the Rosetta Stone. They were trying to translate it, and he is the one who actually went and studied the Coptics. And so I kind of buy this story a little bit. I'll admit, I kind of, maybe it's a little sketchy, but this Mason from Napoleon, went to study under the Coptic monastery near Sinai, and he learned enough about the Coptic language that he was able to figure out what he understands to be what we think some of these hieroglyphs say. And what's funny is, who knows what's real? There are, for whatever reason, a lot of hieroglyphs. It is a crazy, thing to do. It makes sense, but it's crazy to invent so many hieroglyphs that it kind of, to me, says that some of them are real. Now, of course, there are a lot of people who are going to say that's ridiculous, but I don't want to throw the whole baby out with the bathwater. So I'm going to say I think that hieroglyphs might be a thing. Now, there are definitely hieroglyphs that don't make sense, and people say, wow, these people were trying to make hieroglyphs. They couldn't write them right, and they miswrote them on a wall. And that might be, but that's also kind of crazy. So it could be that some people were like, well, they'll never figure out what they say. Let's just decorate this place with some crazy pictures. And, but the thing is, when you start looking at code cryptologists that have studied this, there's a certain amount of repetition that you just have to admit. It's crazy that there's that many repetitions. It has to be an actual language. It's probably not just completely fake. Now, that doesn't mean that things haven't been invented later, but I don't think that this is completely fake. So that's how we got into the Rosetta Stone, the translation of language. Now, Book of the Dead for Amenhotep. We started finding these examples that say this is spell for not perishing, for being alive in necropolis, and the spell for not rotting. And these things connect very much into when we start getting into the Rastafarian movement, that the body doesn't die, or the body will be freshened to become organically alive again, and you'll really get your body back. It's not just a meta; you get your full body. So you have to be very careful with your body, and you have to protect it in the afterlife. And the Book of the Dead, what's interesting is if you really look at the Jewish tradition, you're talking about waiting for the afterlife. And so a lot of this does connect to the Book of the Dead pretty perfectly. Similarly, this is what Joseph Smith says is going to happen, is that there's a waiting period until the end of the world. when all the atonement is paid by Jesus Christ, right? Or whatever. I think that's the plan. So when this happens, then the people who've been dead for a long time will be reborn. So the same stories. You also see similar facsimiles. A copy of the Hypocephalus of Shishonk from the Kirtland Egyptian papers, and then from the times and seasons with the missing sections incorrectly filled in. So here's kind of what they had to start with. Here, what? Okay, there you go. So this is what they kind of had left. Things have been torn out, and here's what they've added back. Okay, so they've added this twin-headed God thing. I don't see the twin-headed God there, but they have added it back. And they've also got this thing here. I don't know what to say about this. Some of this stuff is just, who's to say? So we know that some of the Egyptian stuff has been re-added later. And we also know, again, that a lot of it was burnt. And this is the crazy thing, though, about these libraries and these museums. This museum here, I mean, when you look at a picture of the Chicago fire, it's this street and this museum that's on fire. So it's kind of crazy that so many of these museums that had all in America had all this great stuff from around the world in the 1870s. People had gone all over the world and they'd come back to America and they'd put them in the museums. America had everything from Babylon, from whatever. Not everything, but a lot of stuff. And then they burned it down. And you think, okay, well, what about other museums? They burned them down too. Look at the New York Museum, the Chicago Museum. There's just all these examples of these huge museums just taken out with mummies and stuff. Now, there's another really interesting aspect of this, which is that several of the mummies disappeared. There's another... Okay, I'll just do it. Skull and Bones, Yale. When did Skull and Bones start? Well, when did Latter-day Saints start? When did Skull and Bones keep going? When did Mormonism keep going? So in 1832, 190 years ago, the Skull and Bones sort of, it's kind of a weird way to put it because really they're split off because there was the Linonia Brothers of Unity and the Calliopian Society. You have to remember Linonia is very important. And Brothers in Unity is the four-year secret society with the Hebrew writing, E Parvis, Orientur Magna, and Calliopian Society. And none of these societies are quite the same. So eventually they got to a point where the Order of the Skull and Bones was created. And you guys know about this idea of tomb robbery and keeping skulls and the bonesmen and everything. And I know that right after my YouTube strike, this is the thing I should be talking about, but crooking and the alleged theft of Geronimo's skull. And, there's a bunch of paperwork saying, according to our traditions, the tomb, where is it? It said Bush, right? It should be somewhere here. 6 members of the Yale Secret Society, Skull and Bones, including Prescott Bush, served as Army volunteers at Fort Sill during World War I. In 1986, former San Carlos Apache chairman Ned Anderson received an anonymous letter with a photograph and a copy of a logbook claiming the Skull and Bones held the skull. He met with the Skull and Bones official about the rumor. The group's attorney denied that the group held the skull and said that the 1918 ledger was saying otherwise was a hoax. The group offered Anderson a glass case containing what appeared to be the skull of a child, but Anderson refused it. In 2006, Mark Wortman discovered a 1918 letter from the Skull and Bones member Winter Mead to F. Truby Davidson that claimed the theft. The skull of the worthy Geronimo the Terrible, exhumed from its tomb at Fort Sill by your club, is now safe inside the tomb, and bones together with his well-worn femurs, bits and saddle horn. Wow. So the second tomb refers to the building of Yale's University Skull and Bones Society, but Mead was not at Fort Sill at Cameron University. History professor David H. Miller notes that Geronimo's grave was unmarked at the time. The revelation led Harlan Geronimo of Mescalo, New Mexico, to write to President George W. Bush, grandson of Prescott Bush, requesting his help in returning the remains. According to our traditions, the remains of this sort, especially in this state where the grave was desecrated, needs to be reburied with the proper rituals to return the dignity and let the spirit rest. Ramsey Clark filed a lawsuit on behalf of the people in 2009, claiming Geronimo against the parties, including Robert Gates and Skull and Bones, asking them to return Geronimo bones. An article states that the New York Times states that Clark acknowledged he had no hard proof of the story was true. Investigations, including Bush family biographer Kitty Kelly and the pseudonymous Cecil Adams, say the story is untrue. A military spokesperson from Fort Sill told Adams there is no evidence to indicate the bones are anywhere but in the gravesite. Jeff Hauser, chairman of the Fort Sill Apache tribe of Oklahoma, calls the story a hoax. Is what it is. Okay, I don't think it's a hoax. I think we all kind of know what's really going on there. But where is I lost it. Skull and Bones. Anyway, you get the point. Skull and Bones, they have Moses' skull. That's kind of the story there, is that that's what's going on. What do you want me to tell you? What do you want me to say? I know, it sounds crazy, but I got to find the book where it says this at the bottom here, essentially. There's a book that's called the Book of Abraham, facsimile. No. Where was this? I'll find it for you, but I have a link somewhere that's all about this and where the mummies ended up after the fire. One of the mummies might be in Niagara Falls Museum, but most of the mummies are unaccounted for. I think it's like 2 or 3 of the mummies have been accounted for, and then most of them have disappeared. Antonio Lobolo is the one who supposedly discovered and grave robbed these tombs and found the mummies of Yuya and perhaps of Akhenaten. There's some other interesting things that connect Jesus to Joshua. Joshua, because of the Quran and the way the Quran focuses on the period of time. We're going to have to look at that a bit because it's an interesting idea that the time span is a lot quicker in the Quran. It actually fits with the flamenco timeline. So, on tour in the northern eastern states between April 1833 and June 1835, Michael Chandler toured the eastern United States, displaying and selling 7 of the mummies as he went along. That's when they bought the $2,600 worth of mummies to get the paperwork. Joseph Smith just wanted the paperwork, but the church demanded to buy the mummies as well, in case they were, and it turned out they were very important. Now, did we do fully into, I guess we talked about the younger lady, so we understand that. There's also this idea of the historical origins of the temple complex in Thebes, where Horus would have officiated this ritual in the precinct of Montu and Amun-Re. This is a mining site. Something that we've been finding a lot, if you've noticed recently, was copper mines underneath every single one of these tombs and these temples. So it's almost as if they have these sort of outposts for the mining sites where all the money is coming through. And then they're pulling out greenish copper and stone. And the association with Min. Let's go back there again. Where is it at? Min, because Min is the phallus god, Seminus. Like, I shouldn't laugh, but it's important, right? That Min, who massacres his enemies, also wanks a lot, and his family tree can be reliably reconstructed from independent sources for 8 generations. So that's a big thing too. This idea of 8 generations of independent familial tracing. Well, yeah, Muhammad had that. I mean, sorry, Freudian slip. Moses had that. Turin Museum and Louvre, major contributions, having examined with considerable attention and deepest interest the mummies and catacombs of Thebes. Chandler had his certificate of learn that made his placard, was circulated wherever he went. I think that's good. Sale to Joseph Smith, collection in Kirkland, mounting of the papyri. Anyway, I'll just kind of try to sum this story up as well as I can. The Mormon War is also starting to happen. So the Mormons are being told they have to get out of Missouri. They're going to get killed. And then, they're relocating to their headquarters in Illinois. And a lot of kids are murdered. Women and children are murdered. Shot in the heads. Terrible stuff. People need to really learn more about the Mormon Wars because, straight up, there were women and children that were this is a bad situation, what happened here. But you got to remember how crazy it was, too. You got these people saying that they believe in this religion. You don't? I don't know. It's a hard sell. But they came in not drinking, cleaning up towns, recycling. How dare they? So that upset a bunch of people. And they were like, hey, we're not going to have a home anymore if we, drink ourselves to death and shoot each other. We better kill these guys who don't drink themselves to death or they're going to have a home. So, okay. Joseph Smith's box of mummies in Richmond Landing. They move the mummies. They get into Illinois and Quincy. He took the papyri. He starts doing the translations. He's using the Urim and Thummim stones, the same stones he used to translate the rest of the Book of Mormon, because theoretically they should be connected. Now, it is interesting that the rest of the books, the plates, are not supposed to be written in Egyptian hieroglyphs, are they? They might be. I don't know. But I would imagine they would be in some sort of a Semitic Phoenician or a hieroglyph, so something we haven't seen. And he translates the books, and he starts getting deeper and deeper into the translation. And remember, this is 26 pages, double-sided. And by the time he's done, he says, he's dead before he ever finishes. But he gets part of Abraham's book out. And Abraham's book has a few of the important stories of Abraham growing. But he never gets to the book of Joshua. So let's see here really quickly. The Joseph Smith Papyri, the Hypocephalus. Here's the original piece. The book of Joseph. I keep doing Joshua. I don't know why. The book of Joseph is an untranslated text identified by Joseph Smith after analyzing Egyptian papyri that came into his possession in 1835. Joseph Smith taught that the text contained the writings of the ancient biblical patriarch Joseph from the same papyri collection. Smith produced the first part of the Book of Abraham, but was killed before any known part of the Book of Joseph was translated. The scroll associated with the Book of Joseph has been found by Egyptologists to be a Book of the Dead, a common funeral document, and is unrelated to the biblical patriarch Joseph. Well, that's a whole different sentence, just to be fair. 11 mummies and several papyri were discovered. We know all this. Joseph the seer saw the records, and by the revelation of Christ could translate these records, which gave an account of our forefathers. Okay, so you got into this idea that there are stories that this priest wrote. Some of it has to do with the Book of the Dead. It makes a lot of sense because he's an Egyptian priest. Even if he's a Jewish priest, he's a priest of Egypt. And so he's going to be working with what they have to deal with. And he's also got Nefertiti's, the wife of Moses scroll, the Zephyrah thing, which is the younger lady. And it's interesting. Of all the things you could have, he's got the things about, and they're about the people that we've been studying are alive at the exact same time as Moses, right? And they're saying, okay, well, this is actually a priest and a princess, and it's maybe 2,000 years later, and they're just named the same things. Well, I mean, prove it. It seems like you got the same time period exactly, and every one of these names matches up with what Joseph Smith is talking about. They're just matching up with the Egyptian names of these characters. And then you've got these, so this is what blew my mind, just that you've got the walking serpent who loses his legs story. Okay, how much of this stuff is really just wrong? Now the deceased striding in front of a pillar, which represents the city of On. Okay, it's a tower. It's a technasma. It's our Tartarian technasma, and it's really more and more interesting because we have to remember we don't know what's real here. Most of this stuff is probably, who knows? Like a lot of this stuff, the idea that this is the kind of writing that they were doing during the Tartarian period is a bit unlikely, right? It seems like this is the fall period. You've got people afterwards. Maybe not. Maybe there's organic paper made by hand out of papyri back then, and there's also electricity at the same time. Maybe. But I imagine that this is right after the fall, and it's the beginning of the, these are the documents they're burning and writing books about. And they're like, oh, I found this document by Josephus. I found this document by Manetho, written about by Josephus, which has been burned, and I found the criticisms of Tertullian. Okay, so Tertullian and these Christians saying, this is why this is wrong, this is why this is bad, this is all this. And interjecting into the text, Josephus has this text which is like, there once was a man from Nantucket. And then it says, who was the Son of God? Surely he was the Christ if he was a man at all. And you're like, that's not how Josephus talks. What the heck is going on? And they'll keep doing it to the text. And you can just see when they've inserted this new propaganda, right, to the text. So that was very interesting to me. I don't want to waste too much of your time on this. I want you to be able to look into this yourself, and you'll find some interesting things you can get copies of. But again, so much of this is lost. which is a bummer. So let's get into Jehovah's Witness pyramid. Now, there's a couple things here. What's the guy's name again? I always forget. Removed. Russell, right? Walter Russell. I think that's Charles Taze Russell. There it is. Okay. This is the pyramid. And everybody's going to say, I want to go see this, right? It's in, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, something like that. It's not there anymore. This thing is really, it's crazy. It was just there. They moved it in September. Now it's not there anymore. They took it out. Apparently, great care was taken to preserve it, but the grout was broken. The pieces of stone were removed from each other, and it was disassembled. It was fully disassembled so it could be regrouted together. And yeah, I mean, let's see what happened. Why, after 100 years, did the Jehovah's Witness just remove the large pyramid at the gravesite of the founder of Charles T. Russell? Well, I think the Jehovah's Witness keep changing what they believe about things personally, because Charles T. Russell believed that the world was ending in 1870-something, and then in 1914, oh man, he almost has my birthday. And then he died, he said, okay, not 1914, 1915 or 16 or whatever it is, and then he died in 1916 before the world ended. Lucky Russell. So that's something to consider, is that, he did do some predictions that didn't work out. And then they said, it's chill, don't worry about it, because Jesus did come back, and it was an invisible war with the devil. And you guys should have seen it. It was great, but you missed it, and that's why, So Joseph Rutherford continued on the church. Now, I could go into all the ways that Mormonism and Christianity and Jehovah's Witness and science and Buddhism, and how they're all have problems, but that's not really why I'm here today. I do want to kind of tell you some interesting things about the Watchtower Society, but, again, remember, they're against blood transfusions and all that comes with it. So that's been a big thing that they've been deliberating on. What are they going to do? Because they're not allowed to have transfusions. How does that affect them during the pandemic, right? So a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses are against messing up their blood. So that's interesting. It's a biblical belief. They'd literally rather die than to break their oath with God. Good for them, but something else about them. The Jehovah's Witness pyramid. I see a claim online that the pyramid had been vandalized since it's by its form. I don't know. I want to see more about why they took the pyramid down. Taken down. There's been a lot of discussion on this already. Oh, because it's been desecrated enough times. Okay. So who did it? Sometime in the last 2 weeks, someone took a sledgehammer to the pyramid monument in Allegheny. They told the top stone smashed across. Wow. Okay, so you have some people that were just destroying this thing, and they had no proper protection for it. You know what, guys? That's why you lost your pyramid, because you had some jerks out there and no one was protecting the monuments. That's out of control, man. Vandalized and taken down. Well, that's all it took. Wanted to vandalize it and take it down. The thing is, though, the pyramid is really interesting. The crown with the cross there. It's not just this pyramid. It's the idea of the pyramid in general to Walter Taze. Did I get that right again? Yeah, Charles. I don't know why I'm doing Walter. Charles Taze Russell. Because he looked... Okay. Pyramid prediction. He used the pyramid math, the false prophecy. He used math to predict the end of the world was 1914, and he was obsessed with the number 19. And, like people can be, Isaiah 19, 19, 19. But Jehovah's Witnesses have abandoned the idea that the Egyptian pyramid has anything to do with true worship. 1928. I don't know. That might be the one true part. That this power system building is somehow connected to this astronomy. Seems kind of reasonable of all things. Now, I wouldn't say go ahead and make a prediction about the end of the world, because it was a Deuteronomy that says, if someone makes a prediction in God's name and it doesn't come true, then they're a false prophet. So that's a bummer for for this buddy here. But, to be a prophet, such a specific thing. What about just being a guy who interprets a lot? And he had his anthropological interpretations that somehow people felt were really important to understand religion. I don't really get Jehovah's Witnesses as well as I get the other ones. I do know that they were pretty anti-Masonic. They said you think, all right, what is the connection with Masonry? And they're like, well, Masonry's bad. You shouldn't be a member of them. So, sounds like they're jealous of their money and control. The other thing I learned by finding this out, that the Jehovah's Witness were not for, that Russell was not for Freemasonry, at least for his members, paying money to some other group than his own. The letters coming to the Watchtower Society talk about, I learned about these groups that offered life insurance. So something I hadn't really considered before, so many of these groups that you paid into to join contributed back life insurance. If you died, your wife would get life insurance because you were a member of the Freemasons. So that's an important thing to consider that we hadn't really thought about before, I think, was just the amount of people that joined this because they were worried that they were working in a system, in a job that didn't have any sort of safety. And so they, not just safety, they're swinging on a roof or something, or they're underground, or they're working in a mine. Masonry offered, Lions Club offered, Odds Fellow. This is something the Odds Fellow was, a bunch of people were talking about the Odds Fellows recently. Odds Fellows offered in life insurance. So it was very useful to people. The Watchtower Society, another connection to them that I do kind of understand a little bit better is the Adventist movement. The Adventist movement started, Adventism. Let's go back first before we get to Seventh-day Adventism. Both of them talking about vegetarianism and Ebionites. I think this is right. If you get into the idea of the Ebionites, the poor ones, it might actually refer to ebony, but we're not sure. A Jewish Christian sect who were vegetarians, viewed poverty as holy, believed in ritual ablutions. And they followed a lot of the Jewish biblical rules. They were still Jewish more than they were modern Christians, right? And there's every generation. You've got Moses' generation were more Egyptian. The Ebionites were more Jewish, for Christians. Everyone, even on their way to becoming the thing that they are now, they lose everything that they were. So they were forced to not be Ebionites. They insisted on the necessity of the following of the written law of Moses alone without the oral law used one. They were saying that the priests, the rabbis, could not have correctly been taking on the oral tradition is false, and the only true law of God would have been the written law. And since Moses had smashed the Torah, you're on thin ice with the written law. So some or all of the Jewish Christian Gospels, such as the Gospel of Ebionites, additional scripture to the Hebrew Bible, but they don't, and they also revere James the Just, an exemplar of righteousness and true successor to Jesus rather than Peter. So they weren't into Peter. They rejected Paul. They said Paul was a false prophet. And this is the beginning of a lot of really important things that you're going to find out about Corinth and these cities where, like in Turkey, where some of these letters are supposed to be written by Paul. A lot of them were rejecting this guy. Okay, here's Tertullian was the first to write against the heresiarch called Abion, the presumed leader of this group. Scholars believe he derived his name from the literal reading of Ebionoi, a follower of Ebionon, a derivation now considered mistaken for lack of any more than substantial reference to such a figure. The term the poor was still used in its original, more general sense. Modern Hebrew still used the biblical Hebrew term the needy, both in Hebrew or Christian for the Ebionite and for almsgiving for the needy at Purim. So back to this Tertullian guy, and I've talked about him a bit. I'm going to have to do more on Tertullian, but this idea that all of history has been completely erased is great. But who wrote it then? Because you have all these books and you have all of these symbols and they do repeat and they're not that far off. So either Tertullian was the greatest creative writer of all time, or he really was this twerp who was fighting against these other groups and worried about their beliefs and saying, well, we should pretty much shut anybody down who's not me. Or there's a middle there. And they're making excuses about why these things that do exist are bad. And I think that's a pretty Occam's razor situation. You wouldn't talk about something unless it existed. You wouldn't fight and argue against something unless it existed. So, in my opinion, Tertullian kind of saying he hates something proves it exists. It could be wrong, but I'm going to go with that. There's also different groups in this, when I'm going to go into Gnosticism more in another talk. I just wanted to connect with you, the Ebionites, into the Adventist movement. So the Adventist movement is a Protestant branch of Christianity that believes the imminent second coming or the second advent of Jesus Christ is nigh. Originating in the 1830s, United States during the Second Great Awakening, Baptist preacher William Miller first publicly shared his belief that the second coming would occur at some point between 1843 and 1844. And it probably did, and who knows? I mean, after 1811, 1812, having an Adventism movement makes sense. You've got the Great Comet, and just remind everybody of this, and I don't know why, but Brittany just, Comet? Are you kidding me? I did not. Great Comet, 1812. I don't know. I just feel embarrassed for the people that didn't know this somehow, because I'm embarrassed for myself for the people that didn't know this. You know what I mean? Because I should have made this more clear, but I thought we've made a lot of videos about this, and someone's like, wait, what? So we have to probably do like a Great Comet Day once a year. I'm going to have a schedule, and we'll just keep bringing it up. Watch the musical, Great Comet, 1812. The Great Comet happened from 1811 to 1812 for 260 days, okay? Is it going to say Napoleon Comet? Where are you? Where did you go? Great Comet of 1811. Wow, okay. Well, but it went on for freaking a year, okay? It went on for literally an entire lunar year, an entire solar cycle. Or, I'm sorry, 2/3 of a solar cycle. So, October 1811, at its brightest, and when it was 1.2 AU from Earth, it displayed an apparent magnitude of 0 astronomical unit with an easily visible coma. The comet was discovered March 25th, 1811. Okay, so October, then March. By Monroe Flagwares at 2.7 AU from the Sun in the now defunct constellation of Argo Navis. After being obscured for several days by moonlight, it was also found by Jean-Louis Pont on April 11th, with Franz Xavier Baron von Zach was able to confirm Fabergé's discovery the same night. So this thing just kept going and going and going, and people just kept watching it and watching it and watching it forever. It just wouldn't stop. So let me just get to better. Yeah, you got this. They tracked it across the sky as well, and so everyone was just like, "What is going on with this particular comet?" That turned out to be lots of comets, because when it broke up, at least it was just raining from the sky. And Russia's burnt. Napoleon invades Russia. Tecumseh looks at it as a sign that the Confederacy of the Native Americans are going to win. The New Madrid earthquake happens. Every crazy thing. The most interesting movie, The Great Comet, is mentioned in Les Miserables, which I want them to do Lego Miserables, because that was something they brought up. Oh my God. The Chipmunks movie. We're going to stop everything. I didn't even talk about the Chipmunks movie yet. Guys, have you not seen the Chipmunks movie? So I'm going to try to get Tad Stones on here, who invented the Chipmunks and did the Buzz Lightyear show, I think maybe in June, and we'll talk to him a bit. But he didn't make the new movie. But we both thought it was interesting. He said, you should check it out. So I went and saw it. And it's amazing. The new Chipmunks movie is amazing. I don't know why I keep saying Chipmunks. This is really embarrassing. I'm going to calm down. Rescue Rangers, Chip and Dale. And it's hilarious because the Chipmunks make cameos in the Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers movie, because they're like, oh, those guys, they're still famous in 3D. And then, one of them gets, Dale gets a CGI surgery, so he's all digital and 3D looking like everybody else. I can't ruin the movie for you, but it's very much a Who Framed Roger Rabbit meta layered film where it's not an episode of Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. It's sort of just about the lives of Chip and Dale who were in the Rescue Rangers, and it's so much fair use. Disney used fair use because they have Batman and they have some symbols in there that I don't think Disney owned. Maybe Disney somehow got the rights to it, but I think just fair use. They were saying in this world, these symbols exist. So it was an amazing use of fair use by Disney itself. I thought it was good. I don't know what else to say about the Rescue Rangers movie. Now, it wasn't perfect. Gadget, the goddess, was respected but limited in her scope, and that was kind of a bummer. Okay, the Rescue Rangers I've talked about. It was a good movie. It was cool. It made me happy. Some people didn't like it. I didn't understand. There's a 1992 movie called The Year of the Comet, which is kind of about the comet. I don't remember actually even. Did I see this movie? Oh, yeah, it's a great year for European wine because of the sulfur from the stars. I don't know, man. Here's the deal. This comet went on for 260 days. People would stand around watching it being like, what is going on? Completely confused for a long time. And then finally in 1812, the comet stopped raining. By that point, Mississippi River was flowing backwards. Earthquakes had happened all around the world. Cities had fallen. Napoleon had taken over. Moscow had been burned. Venezuela had collapsed. Everywhere you go, Arcadians were losing control. Everything was just everything. There's huge amounts of collapse of civilization at this point. Tecumseh loses his control over his military. The most unsuccessful effort that year to bring Southern tribes into his pan-native alliance. And he saw it as a favorable omen. So much was going on because of the comet of 1812. I'm trying to remember if there was, the Star is Born, the connection with Jesus and the comet is also very important. So they were thinking, hey man, the world is ending. And when the world ends, what are we going to do? And that's going to be terrible. And so they said, okay, well, clearly when the world ends, we're going to go to heaven. And when it didn't, they're like, well, it must be soon. So maybe in 1843, 1844, because we're grown-ups now, it's going to be in our lifetime because we saw as kids that something happened. So it's going to happen. And then it didn't, and they kept pushing it off, like 1870s. Oh, 1914. Oh, 1997. Oh, 2012. You know what I mean? And this is kind of how Adventism works, is the idea that the Lord's coming, it's going to end the world. It feeds into, and it's fed in from so many of these other things. I think we talked about the Unarius science last time, but I'll bring them up again because, I feel like we have new people coming all the time. It's important to know. UFO religion, popular in California with conservatives and with liberals, including Reagan. Reagan and his wife were interested in this group, and they were talking about the end of, not necessarily the end of the world, but the beginning of the new age, I think is the better way. This is this kind of thing here with like Crowleyism, is that the apocalypse is the new age. So they were connecting spiritualism, atomic testing, psychic trips. Norman and Ruth claim to have lived in the past in the lives of Jesus and Mary Magdalene before settling at Escondido. So these are some groups that talk about the voices of Venus, Eros, Orion, Hermes, Muse, important stuff. Muse and Musa, the connection there also to Moses. He talks to a Zoroastrian burning bush. The Ernest criticized religions in several books, who describes in detail the origins of Christianity as rooted in Mithraism and Zoroastrianism and assorted ancient belief structures. Ernest agreed with Karl Marx that religion was the opium of the people, yet claimed to realize that many individuals were still at such a point in their evolution where religion still served a positive purpose and kept them from harming their fellow man. So these kinds of groups, very American, Adventist groups, and when their leaders were wrong, when things didn't end in these periods, they lost some members to a new group. Then this group split in half. 1914, a new shatter. And by, when is this? 1863, you have the beginning of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And so their group, vegetarians, keeping Shabbat on Saturday. They have a cool camp by my house, and they let you watch free movies. And that goes back to the beginning, that they would show people projections of movies and feed them vegetarian food and try to get them to join their Millerite movement. The Millerite movement follows the teaching of William Miller, the Adventist who left the church, Seventh-day Adventist Church, from the Second Advent. It was formed officially in 1863. Among his co-founders was Ellen G. White, whose extensive writings are still held in high regard by the church. They started introducing, kosher food again. advocating vegetarianism, right? So all the Ebionite gospel stuff, all the stuff that you're supposed to do according to the original Christians, they're really trying to keep that going. And for better or for worse, right? Because trying to do things that people did in the ancient time, trying to do something to fit into another mold, who's to say that's the deal? But they're saying, yeah, God created the universe in 6 days. Saturday is the day you got to rest, not Sunday. Get away from the Constantinian mind frame. And that kind of syncs up with some of the things that lead to some of these other more wilder movements again, right? We're talking about Mormonism, but also Rastafarianism. Rastafarianism takes a lot from the Adventist movement. This idea that the world is coming to an end soon. It's going to be replaced with fire because last time it was replaced with water. And the recovery will require an ITAL diet where we don't eat bad food and we remain kosher, and so this resurgence of all these ideas start to become important. But then, the Great Disappointment led to the shattering of the Adventist movement and led to the Seventh-day Adventists in 1844 when they found out that their second coming wasn't the way they expected. Kind of a bummer for them. But, it's good because it led to all these groups saying, hey, maybe we don't understand religion, or maybe we don't need a minister to sell us a book to understand religion. And so many of the positive spiritual groups. So on one hand, in America, you have everyone creating their own religions and selling snake oil. And you even have Miller selling wheat that he said was like holy wheat. And he got arrested and for fraud or for counterfeiting or something, for con artistry, for saying this wheat would grow faster and bigger and better because it was holy wheat. Okay, so this group of people, they're like, this is crazy. And then you've got the Soviets who are saying, well, religion is wrong and we're going to make it illegal. And what both of these things do is it allows for religion to become itself again. Spirituality, just couldn't help itself, starts to spring up in the Soviet Union more and more. And dogma in the United States continuously just breaks down more and more. The more separation of church and state, the more religion just sort of breaks down. And it's not a perfect metaphor, but you look at even Scientology. Even Scientology has gotten to the point where the walls around it that used to be enforced by copyright, even that religion is being kind of broken down and assimilated into the ether of human experience and religious ideology. So, with the development of Sabbatarianism, early Adventist movements considered Sabbath on Saturday. Preble was trying to be influenced by the Rachel Oakes Preston Seventh-day Baptist. And Seventh-day Baptists, that's kind of where they were like, we really got to get back to the Saturday tradition. It's an interesting thing to look into as well. Beliefs. Seventh-day Adventist beliefs are expressed in 28 fundamental beliefs. They believe in law, Sabbath, second coming, and end times, holistic nature, human nature. That is, that humans are an indivisible unity of body, mind, and spirit. Conditional immortality, great controversy. Humanity is involved in the great controversy between Jesus Christ and Satan. Heavenly sanctuary, investigative judgment. A judgment of professed Christians began in 1844 with the Book of Record, which the Book of Records are examined for all the universe to see. The investigative judgment will affirm who will receive salvation and vindicate God in the eyes of the universe as just in dealings with mankind. Remnant, there will be an end-time remnant who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus. The remnant proclaims the three angels' messages of revelation, spirit of prophecy. The ministry of Ellen G. White is commonly referred to as the spirit of prophecy, and her writings speak with prophetic authority and provide comfort and guidance and instruction to the church. Okay, we'll get into Ellen B. White. But the thing with this organization is they have been saying that when the world ends, this is what Jehovah's Witnesses have said, it's this 144,000 thing, right? So you have these 12 by 12,000, 12 tribes by 12,000, and if you believe you're going to be part of the 12 by 12,000 and you announce it and you're correct, there's no ritual really. That's a big part of the Jehovah's Witness faith. The Seventh-day Adventists have a bit more to it, like you're supposed to follow the Torah. You have to follow the laws of vegetarianism and Sabbatarianism and all the rules. But with the Seventh-day Adventists in general, they've continued on with a more reasonable approach to what were the same Adventist lines that Jehovah's Witness came from. The Jehovah's Witness have added a lot more when they talk about the Egyptian. Oh, let me find this if I can find. There was a video they saw about this, which was like pyramid calculation. Jehovah's Witness. Jehovah's Witness, 1914. Did you know a pyramid was used to calculate? And so there's a huge thing with this idea of the pyramid being used to calculate this important number, and that 1914, which turned out not to be the end of the world, but do remember 1914 is the beginning of kind of the beginning of World War One, and it's an important year for the assassination of Frank Ferdinand, etc. So it really was the end of a lot of things. 1914 is a really important year. It's not that it wasn't. The idea that there was an invisible battle between Satan and Jesus almost makes sense in 1914. I mean, but just saying, it really is kind of a strange year. So many crazy things, volcanoes that hadn't gone off in thousands of years, explosions, men flying, right? Like flying planes all the time in war. I mean, the whole thing was just, this is when we accept that the world has changed. So, I don't know. Is this the apocalypse for the Jehovah's Witness? Maybe. A lot of them say no, it was not, and they continued on creating new explanations for their religion, but it's worth considering how strange 1914 really is. Charles Taze Russell. A lot of Jehovah's Witnesses really have some issues with Charles Taze Russell, by the way. And they seem to have basically erased him from everything. All right, I think that's basically what I want to cover today. Let me check and see if there's one more thing I can get through really quickly. Medieval prayer book is revealing the truth. Genius of antiquity's greatest scientist. Okay, so here's another thing. Archimedes went to a religious school, and Alexandria, if you can consider Alexandria a place, because it's former Heliopolis, but all of the information that he's coming up across using mathematical formulas, it'd be amazing to say that he just made them up and didn't get them from somewhere, but it's more likely he got them from somewhere. Now, we know that they rebuilt everything, and we don't know what's real, and who's to say that Alexandria is what it is, but the Archimedes Codex shows that this guy was a priest. He was in a priest school, and all of the data we have suggests that this was a religious study. Now, you can deal with the fact that the Jesuits have rewritten a lot of things. I don't think that's what's going on here. Oh, you know what? Time to check my super chats. Okay, good call. Let me see here. How does this work? To scroll. And guys, thanks again for setting up the show, or for making sure that you were here, for supporting me, for sending a bunch of different things. Oh, Aunt Queenie, I'm gonna make sure. I'm gonna make a moderator out of Benevolent Dreams. Thanks, Benevolent Dreams. Also, just try to behave yourself. And thank you for the support. That guy. Giant thumbs up if you got him. Thank you, guys. Yeah, like and subscribe and share. Aaron, good to see you. Eyes sees. Rachel Barbie. Acacia. Peter Petrov. Well, I think that covers everything for today. Cool, guys. Like, subscribe, go to the Patreon, go to Xirtus.com, go to Andreas.me, go to the Andreas.me store. I'll show you guys Andreas.me store again, /store. Let me jump to this. Oh, that's the wrong window. That's never going to be the right window with you, Andreas. You just can't help yourself. Andreas.me store, grab yourself one of these shirts, or you can go to Andreas.me. There's two stores because there's like the lower cost store, and then there's like the crazier design store and the propaganda merchandise. Button on Andreas.com will take you to Xirtus.creator-spring.com, and I'll probably make more links to this. But there's a lot of crazy good designs here. There's the advanced philosophy stuff. There's the Tartaria stuff. Fanny packs, socks, wraparound shirts. I like these ones a lot. The Tartaria Bro, I Need You one. Xirtus a gear. I like the Xirtus gear a lot. Imagine doing yoga in that. Here's a yoga mat. Here's your Croatian shield flag if you're into that St. Gregory, Pope Gregory stuff. And some Kokopelli stuff about mosquitoes and Kokopelli. So, a lot more there too. So, yeah, hope you guys enjoyed that. Talk to you tomorrow, I guess. Peace and love.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.